Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kelly Steinke. I'm the Executive Director of Read Learning Educational Services. I'm also the author of Silver Moon Spelling Rules. Amongst other roles, I teach adjunct at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh and served as the president of the Wisconsin IDA board formerly. And my experience and background lies in special education, where I taught for almost 20 years or so, and landed in the field of dyslexia really out of necessity, because both of my daughters are dyslexic, and kind of just followed that need and found a passion working with students and now helping teachers.
I am Carla O'Brien. I am the Executive Director of Professional Development for SLANT System, which is a structured language approach based upon Orton-Gillingham methods. My experience is as a special education teacher for around 22 years. I had some administrative experience as well in there, but my passion has really become empowering teachers with the skill set and tools to help struggling readers. This approach, SLANT, actually really changed my life as a teacher, for my students, and I saw such huge benefits. It was the best professional development I'd had in my career. So now I am paying that forward and training other teachers in this method as well. All right, so we like to start every professional development or learning opportunity with this great little phrase from Anita Archer, the great Anita Archer: affirm, remind, and expand. Sometimes when we take these, we participate in webinars and courses, we have our practices and our beliefs are affirmed. Sometimes we have to be reminded of things that we had once learned that are a good practice, and sometimes, hopefully, we expand your knowledge. So hoping to do that all today, that we want to do all of these things: affirm, remind, and expand.
Wonderful. And this quote comes from a text I actually use as an adopted course text in one of my undergrad classes at the university, the Birch Manual, which is kind of like the Bible of Orton-Gillingham, one of them. And Birch is quoted as saying, "Spelling is one of the most important and most forgotten aspects of literacy development. In many classroom settings, it's looked at as an afterthought, and instruction is limited to rote spelling drills and memorization."
And I will never forget, I was sitting, my oldest son, so many years ago, he's in his 20s now, but when he was in 4th grade, I had actually raised concerns with his teacher about his spelling because he was a very poor speller. And she was not at all concerned with that. She just said, "You know what? We rely so much on computers now, he could just type and use spell check." However, to this day, he is still a weak speller. He hates to read, and it still makes me wonder if that has any tie to the fact that he just really never learned to be a good speller.
Yeah, Carla, I was going to add, yeah, I have a similar story. My daughters were both dyslexic, and we identified their dyslexia way back in kindergarten, but it takes time to remediate, and the spelling is usually always a weaker end of things, the weaker skill of between reading and spelling. And they always felt a really great deal of pressure surrounding spelling in school. Word sorts confused them, really to the point of tears quite often. They couldn't memorize words to pass spelling tests. And, they weren't being taught a real deep understanding of why we spell the way we do. So they weren't passing their spelling tests. And it even translated over to group work, or board work, large poster projects. Those projects and that group work became really stressful because they were misspelling a lot of the things that their classmates were seeing. And their peers would especially comment about those misspellings as they got older. So we both have that family connection and student connection. And what we do know for sure is that spelling is directly related to decoding. And, we can't neglect the importance of creating good spellers. And along the way, we're going to create stronger readers.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's talk about what goes on in the brain of a non-impaired reader. Here we have a dog, And when I say that word, your brain is processing those sounds that I'm saying to understand what I'm saying. So this happens very on in human brain development. If you try, you can segment that word into individual sounds or phonemes. So this first part of the brain is what is developing our phonological processor. You can hear the word, you hear d, g, right? This is activated when you hear those sounds within the spoken words. And now you've attached meaning to that word. The next area of the brain over here is the parieto-temporal or the phonological assembly, that green area. This is activated when making the sound to symbol correspondences. And I should just actually go back. This has been proven through functional MRI brain research that this is what is happening in the brain. So now you can take those sounds, the d, g, and correspond them to the symbols that we see in print. So that is what is happening in that part of the brain. We call that the phonological assembly. Over time, with explicit instruction in phonemic awareness and phonics, exposure to those sounds, the symbols that represent them, they get stored into that back part of the brain, that red area, which is the occipital temporal region, or what we call the orthographic processor. So now when you see those symbols, DOG, in that letter string, you know that that says dog. You instantly recognize it. Your brain does not have to work hard for it. It is automatic. That has become a sight word. This is the process of orthographic mapping. Perhaps you've heard that word before, but this is what is meant by orthographic mapping. There is another area of the brain, this yellow area, which is the context and meaning processor. This part of our brain develops around 4th grade and beyond for students. And this is where now, if you have words that have multiple meanings, they start to determine, based upon the context of what is being spoken or what is being read, what that mean. Your brain can pull that meaning to make connection to for comprehension.
Yeah, Carla, I love the graphic you created. If anyone's looking for the actual scientific photos or information on this, I would recommend looking at Overcoming Dyslexia by Sally Shaywitz. And I like to present orthographic mapping kind of in a formulaic style. So this is exactly what Carla just shared, just a little different way to look at it. Really, orthographic mapping is when you go from a phoneme, so you're hearing the sound, you're learning the spelling and how to read that sound. So you're learning the phonetic pattern, and that goes to ID and usage. And this is all encapsulated under that umbrella of word meaning. Right. So when you can combine your sounds with your letters, with the meaning of those words that you're creating with those phonetic patterns, that information maps within a brain to be more automatic, to create sight words. And by sight words, we don't mean those irregular words that you can't sound out. We're referring to words that you can look at and just read automatically.
Yeah, those words that have gone through that orthographic mapping process within the brain.
Yes. Yeah, Linnea Airy, she's probably the most noted and researched. I'm fumbling my words here, but what I'm trying to say is she's probably one of the most referenced reading researchers out there. She shows there are 4 necessary components for orthographic mapping to occur. And those 4 components you're going to see themes of throughout our entire presentation today. But we start with letter recognition. She then goes to letter sound correspondences. Phonemic awareness is essential, especially that blending and segmenting. Those are the 2 key pieces Linnea Airy highlights as absolutely necessary for good reading and spelling. And then 4th, repeated practice with both encoding and decoding. And, Dr. Anita Archer, if you follow her, she would definitely, validate that. So let's continue on, because you're gonna notice these themes throughout today's webinar.
So phonemic awareness, let's start with that. It's, as we talked about in that brain, that beginning part of that brain is that ability to identify and manipulate and hear those individual sounds within words, those phonemes. So as we just looked about what is happening in that brain of that typically developing reader, we know that being able to hear and identify those sounds within words is really important skill for learning how to spell words correctly. I mean, that's, if you can't hear the sounds, how are you going to spell them? So we really have to work on building this part first. So good phonemic awareness is crucial. Numerous studies have shown that phonemic awareness is a strong predictor of reading and spelling success. So, in fact, researchers have found that children with good phonemic awareness skills in kindergarten and first grade are more likely to become strong readers and spellers later on. The really great thing about an Orton-Gillingham approach is that it does switch from speech to print and print to speech. And phonemic awareness is a really integral component of every lesson. So we really leave no stone unturned when it comes to making sure that students are getting the necessary skills to help build their literacy brain. So now that we've discussed that reciprocal relationship between reading and spelling, let's talk about how we can be intentional. So really helping our students to segment and blend phonemes is a very simple procedure that you should be including with every lesson that you're doing. What I'm referring to, though, is an auditory exercise. It's pulling apart and putting back together those individual phonemes that we hear. So at this point, we're not talking about seeing words in text. We're talking about hearing and speaking. So hearing the word sat and having your students pull out and counting, using some sort of hand movement or manipulatives to break apart those phonemes, at, or giving them the phonemes b, and telling them to put it together. When you think about that, as we're getting into reading, students that are activating those two frontal parts of the brain are doing a lot of slow sounding out. So this is going to help them to become better, quicker, automatic word readers. So you're going to be receiving a packet after this, and some of these materials that you see will be included. So we can use Encoding boxes, very simple to manipulate the sound. So let's segment. Listen to my word. My word is fish. What word do you hear? Tell me the sounds you hear. Sh. What word? Fish. So you can create that visual for your students. Now listen to my word clip. What word? Clip.
I can do this with you, Carla.
Student.
How about I'll be the student, you be the teacher. What's the word?
Clip. Tell me the sounds and move the chips.
Okay, clap.
Clip.
Is the word clip?
Clip. Tell me the sounds you hear in the word clip.
Got it. Clip. Oh, it.
What word?
Clip.
Good. Now let's blend. Listen to my sounds. B, a, g. Repeat. And as you're repeating, I want you to move the chips. Ready?
B, a, g.
What word do you hear? Say it fast.
Bag.
Good job. And we could do the same thing with the word, with the sounds sh, r, g. Repeat.
Sh, g.
Good. What word?
Shrug.
Awesome. All right. So
Yeah. So, this is a great quote too. If you're digging for more information, look at our references, because you're going to see a lot of really great researchers referenced in these quotes. But spelling and reading, they do build and rely on the same mental representation of a word. So knowing the spelling of a word makes it accessible and sturdy for fluent reading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, those who are good spellers and readers can both lift the meaning off the page in reading, but they can also put meaning back onto the page in spelling and writing. So in the chat, tell us what you think, what percentage of words in the English language are truly irregularly spelled? I always like to see the answers on this one. So what percentage of words in the English language are truly irregularly spelled? I see 5% so far. Really? You all think that low? Okay. 10%. All right. Well, you're all really kind of spot on there. It's around 4%. So the spelling of a word is really based upon all these factors, starting with the sound symbol correspondences, syllable patterns, and then we get into more complex factors here, the orthographic rules, where that word came from, the origin of the word, what does that word mean? All of this affects spelling. And, sometimes I think you look at a word and you say, boy, that looks strange. I sometimes do this. I look at a word that I've seen over and over, like the word was, and you look at it one day and you're like, that looks really weird. I wonder why it's spelled that way. And if you really dig deeper, there is reasons why words are spelled the way they are. But it all affects spelling. And if it's not really kind of straightforward and having that one-to-one correspondence for our students that are learning that sound symbol correspondence, it can be more difficult.
Yeah, I think we have some teachers in this group that have a little background, which is wonderful. Because those guesses were pretty close. So fantastic. I like to use a cake analogy because I love bakery and I love eating bakery. So this was actually my niece's birthday cake a couple years back. She wanted a fancy unicorn cake, so this was her unicorn cake. And she was turning like 7 years old. So, perfect for that little girl age range. But all of these layers, within this cake, you've got your regular phonetic spelling, your rule-based spelling, etymology, morphology, your regular words, all what Carla just shared with us. They all play an important role. And I think of each of these as a layer in this cake. And I found that when I work with struggling readers and spellers, the easiest, most logical way to approach spelling as an intervention tool or as a universal, comprehensive curriculum is to support literacy by making sure your student has the basics. So make sure they have their most common letter sound correspondences down. Then you can present the rules because they are very reliable if you know how to teach them. You present the rules in coordination with your syllable patterns and your reading instruction, and you start to add these other layers as you go. So it's not if I use this, then I can't use this approach. It's not a rule-based only approach within OG. It's let's get all these layers in there, but what's sticking them all together, kind of that frosting in the middle, sticking all those layers together, I feel are your spelling rules or your spelling generalizations. It holds everything together and allows you to start layering some of these other pieces in, which is a really fun way to teach spelling.
Exactly. Good. I love that cake. Now everybody's probably hungry for cake.
It was really tasty, just so you know, it's really good.
So if you were surprised by that low number, maybe some of you weren't and thinking it was more, perhaps you're curious about the other 96%, but they are truly predictable in spelling. So let's start talking about the basics because we need to have these, right, for a strong foundation.
Yeah, gotta have the basics. Students of all ages need to know the basics. And I work with a lot of undergrad students who are going to be special educators, and they kind of look at me sideways. A lot of them do. And I say, I don't care what age the students are you're working with within your practicum or your clinicals, they all have to have that basic letter sound correspondence in order to be able to build, reading and spelling skills to more complex patterns. And see, I'm going to share a story with you about this. Maybe I wonder how many of you can relate to this. A number of years ago, I had a family come into my reading center for a consultation. And they had a 3rd grade daughter, a little girl, and very bright young lady, verbal expression was wonderful. I could tell she was just a creative, kind of out of the box thinker. But this parent was really concerned about her reading. But she came in kind of hesitantly. She says, none of my daughter's teachers have mentioned any concerns. She's just kind of flying by with pretty good grades. there are no concerns at all, but I have concerns as a parent. I don't see her sounding words out. I see her just trying to read by memory. And so I said, well, all right, well, let's take a look at what's going on. Um, and so long story short, I gave the student a battery of screeners, really simple screeners to use. We're not talking like Woodcock Johnson or like fancy norm-based assessments, but in the end, I got an instructional reading level for this little girl of primer. Okay, she's in 3rd grade, and a score of 52 correct words per minute on a 1st grade level passage. So that primer level was isolated word list. In context, she was reading 52 words per minute at a 1st grade level. And so I pulled out a letter sound screener. And I don't always pull this out for all students, but I thought, we better take a look. And I'm going to show you this letter sound screener in just a moment. But it was as simple as look at the letter, tell me the most common sound. And as I suspected, this young girl only knew 65% of her most common letter sounds, just above half. And she was in 3rd grade, going into the end of 3rd grade. She had a score of 17 out of 26. Now, why am I highlighting this? I don't think this is something that most 3rd grade or maybe even 2nd grade teachers really look at anymore, especially towards the end of 2nd grade. Definitely 3rd grade. 3rd grade, you're not learning to read much anymore. You're reading to learn. And so it was really upsetting for the parent to realize. It was upsetting for me to see, because you just have to ask, how was this missed? How did that letter sound correspondence get lost, somewhere between pre-K and 3rd grade? Teachers we are moving on, our kids are moving on to more advanced skills. So the whole point of the story is they've got to know the basics, right? So if you have a struggling reader, no matter their age, I give these next screeners even to 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, if appropriate. And oftentimes it shows that these kids, even the older ones, don't have their basic letter sound correspondences. And these are some very important skills to cement so that they can have more success with more advanced concepts. So let's take a look at some of these screeners. Okay, like I said, really basic. Anyone can deliver this screener. Essentially, all you're doing is pointing to a letter and asking the student to tell you the most common sound. Now, notice I said most common sound. Because we teach in frequency, of our language, like how often is a sound used compared to its alternate sounds. For instance, C, students often say, S. Okay, that's great. Validate that. Yes, C can say, S, but more frequently, it's going to say what sound? It's going to say that sound. And that's a really important distinction. If a student can tell you the second sound, the soft C, but not the hard C, they can't pull that sound, it's going to cause a problem with their reading and spelling because they know one of C's sounds, but they don't know the primary one that we see all the time in reading and spelling. And that's true for multiple letters that have multiple sounds. So give a basic letter sound screener. See what your students know or don't know. If you're working with an older student and you feel weird doing this, blame it on yourself. I will always say, you know what? I need to get some practice using this screener. I haven't used it very often. Just let me practice this on you and we'll see how you do. Being that you need help, allow the student to help you practice this screener if you're uncomfortable giving this to an older student. Now, I always ask my students, my adult students, how could you assess encoding with this screener instead of decoding? Carla, what would you do? How would you flip this and make it an encoding screener?
Oh, you put me on the spot here.
Oh.
I would probably dictate those sounds to the student and have them write those sounds, right?
Exactly. Yes,
So
exactly.
then have it. Yeah.
Yeah, you're good on the spot. Yeah. So cover up the letters. Don't let the kids see the letters. Give them the sound and ask them to repeat the sound and write the letter. And it's just so interesting because sometimes you'll get kids that really are very good at their basic letter sound correspondence, but as soon as you ask them to write those letters for the sounds they hear, they fall apart. And you might notice some real distinct differences if you flip the script and ask them to encode instead of decode. So here's our freebie number 1. This is going to be included in your packet of materials that we email out later today. Freebie number 2 is a brief auditory discrimination screening. This is something I latched onto in my research on dyslexia and just its correlation to difficulty discriminating between very similar sounds. And this is not going to affect the majority of students, but if it does affect your students in a major way, it will hinder them from making essential gains in reading and spelling. So auditory discrimination is simply hearing the difference between similar sounds. So listen to these sounds. Mm.
Mhm.
You know, unless you're watching my mouth, you might not hear the difference between those sounds. And note, this isn't a hearing issue. You know, kids can go to the audiologist and get a completely 100%, 100% score on audiological exam, but it's a discrimination between the sounds. So I'm going to show you how this works. We have got a short video hooked up here. The other piece that this looks at is auditory memory for sequencing of 3 sounds. And these are 2 distinct skills. So let's check out this video. I'll show you how this works.
Okay, hold on. I got to do a little switcheroo in my screen sharing here. All right. Can you all see that nice and big? Okay.
Here's a video demonstration of the Silvermoon Spelling Rules brief auditory discrimination screening. This screener can be found on our website at www.silvermoonspellingrules.com/getting started. All you need for this screener is your teacher copy, whether it's electronic or on paper, some manipulatives, so you could use tiles, tokens, or beads or other manipulative, and a student. So here's our student today. Meet Gus. You want to say hi? Hi. Yeah. Thank you for helping out today. This is going to help teachers figure out how to do this screening. So here's how the screening works. Gus, I'm going to give you a few sounds, and all you have to do are repeat the sounds after me, and then I'll give you a little more information about what we'll do next. Okay. So your first set of sounds are Nice work. Now, all I want you to do is pull down 1 tile for each sound while you say the sentence. Perfect. Now touch and say each sound 1 more time. Excellent. And that's how you do it. So you can clear those off. Nice work. We'll go through a couple more of these. Okay, here's your next one. Repeat these sounds after me. B. B. Very good. There's a little bit of audio problem here. Sorry about that. For some reason it's glitching. Now, there's a trick to this one. If you hear the same sound, you can use the same color. So I'll repeat those back and show me if you have any tiles that should be the same color. Here we go. B. Ready? They're the same. Excellent. Those 2 are the same. And what do you hear for that middle sound? B. You do. Perfect. I should say those sounds. B. Excellent. You'll wash those away. Okay, we can pause this video. One more.
All right.
Okay, that was a little bit hard to hear in certain parts. I'm not sure why, but these are available for viewing on YouTube, I believe they're loaded up too, so you can watch it at your leisure. But if you could have heard him correctly, he wasn't saying words at all. He was repeating 3 distinct and individual sounds. So the task here is to see, can he hear the difference between very similar sounds? And can you hold on to the correct sequence of those sounds? If you do this screener enough, you'll find that a lot of students with dyslexia have just a horrible time trying to remember the sequence of sounds, the correct sounds, and or even hearing the difference between the sounds. So a couple different skills going on. And if this is weak, I do recommend more of an auditory discrimination in-depth training program. And if you've got questions about that, you can let me know. We'll talk Q&A at the end.
Mm-hmm.
The next screener we have, so the first one was letter sound screener, which you can flip to make encoding. The second one was your auditory discrimination and memory. And this third one is your phoneme segmentation screener. Why are we showing you these? Because these 3 or 4 skills are some of those essential skills leading into having a successful start to using an Orton-Gillingham kind of scope and sequence with your reading and spelling programming. This, we don't have the video loaded for, or do we have the video loaded for this? Sure, we can just show a little snippet of this. Essentially, you're having the student segment sounds within words to see if they can separate out, especially those blends at the beginning, blends at the end. So this is all very systematically written. Go ahead.
Let me find it. Phoneme segmentation. Yep, right.
Here's Gus again.
Oops, hold on a second. There we go. Now you see that? Okay.
Here's a video demonstration of the Silver Moon Spelling Rules phoneme segmentation screener. All you need for this screener is your teacher tool to keep record and give the screener. You'll need some tiles or a different form of manipulative for your student to use. And of course, you'll need your student, which we have right here. Meet Gus. All right, nice. Thank you for being here again, Gus. So I'll show you how this screener works. I'm going to give you a word. All you have to do is repeat the word after me, and then pull down 1 tile for each sound you hear in the word. You ready? Okay, let's start with the word cat. Okay, hold on 1 tile for each sound. Cat. Fantastic. And the word is cat. All right, let's push those tiles back. Another word, lush. Lush. 1 tile for each word. Excellent. And your word was lush. Okay, that's great. Now, if your student needs another step in between repeating the word and pulling down the tiles, we might want to slow the word down. So let's try it that way. You've done this before. So here's a new word. The word is sled. Sled. Okay, let's say that one really slow first. Sled. Hold on your tiles. Sled. Awesome. And the word was? So how many sounds are in the word sled? 4. You got it. That's perfect. Thank you for demonstrating the screener.
All right.
Yes, Gus is such a good sport. So, it really is just, you task analyze these skills and help the kids break them down so that they're successful.
All right.
Yeah, so this segues really nicely. When you're using an Orton-Gillingham based program, whether it's comprehensive or supplemental, you're going to use kind of a building block style of teaching. So I like to use this phonemic patterns kind of ladder or trajectory to show teachers how we start and where we build to within a system like this. So We're assuming at this point your kids have got their most basic letter sound correspondences, or all but a few of them. If there are a few that are issues, you could use a keyword sound chart, which if you would like information on that, we can share more information later. But at that point, you're going to move on and add a sound. So we're going to start with a vowel consonant. It could be a real word, could be a nonsense word, but we're going to use these for reading and spelling. You could use up, ip, op, ap, at. Whoops, almost the wrong sound almost came out. Almost used an S there, that would be inappropriate. And what doesn't that happen though? Like students
Yes.
will sound something out and you'll go, ooh, that wasn't good.
They can always read those words too.
Yeah, they can.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I know. So once you get your vowel consonant down pat, meaning pretty much mastered, then you can add another sound. So we go from 2 sounds to 3 sounds. And once you go to your 3 sounds, which are relatively easy to segment your up, because there aren't any blends, included there, or digraphs. Your next more difficult task would be to start adding some blends. So we start with a blend at the end, and then we take that and we move to adding a consonant vowel, consonant consonant, which is your blend at the end again. Then we have blends on both sides. And so we just kind of progress through this pattern of simple, more complex, more complex, more complex. Think of building a building with Legos. You lay that green kind of Lego piece foundation first. Those are kind of the skills we talked about in the screeners we just looked at. And from there, you start to layer the pieces on. So this is a nice visual you can use to reference whether or not your scope and sequence you're using is actually doing that.
Yeah. And hopefully you have a scope and sequence, because it is very powerful. So, there's so many out there, and every Orton Gillingham based approach will have a slightly different one, but in general, they start with the most common sounds, most simple concepts, moving on that hierarchy of more difficulty. It is very powerful to have a scope and sequence. It really, truly is your roadmap for you to know what to teach, when to teach it, and in what order. And every skill should build upon the next. So if you don't have one, I know there's many available out there. This is just a quick overview of what we work on in stage 1 of SLANT. As you can see that, there are seven stages total. So this first stage is our very, very basic stage. The foundational skills, all single consonant, short vowels, digraphs. We do get into spelling rules early on, but they are the very simple spelling rules for our students. And when they come up in the sequence, the students are ready for it, because they've had those foundational skills of the sounds, and then we don't give them too many at once. They're kind of spread out. So we just start with that F, L, S, and Z rule, which we're going to go over in a minute, the CK generalization and CK spelling. And then here's Silver Moons.
Yeah, you can't divorce spelling from reading, or reading from spelling. So I created the program Silver Moon Spelling Rules to be a supplemental tool. Essentially, you plug and play. You can plug it into whatever scope and sequence you're using. We'll show you how to do that in just a moment. Or you can use it as is, from front to back, cover to cover. Silver Moon consists of 3 books. Each book covers 2 or 3 different syllable patterns until all 7 in our language are covered. And this is our progression of skills. I don't have the whole progression here. If you'd like it, you could request that and I can email it to you. But essentially, you'll see exactly what's covered in which lesson, and what exactly those concepts are that we're introducing. You should already be seeing some similarities from what Carla just showed us to what I'm showing you now with your doubling rule and your CKK at the end, and some of these concepts.
Here.
Yeah, if you're wondering what silver moon is, you've never heard of it, really, it's a fun way to make spelling rules come to life,
And we're gonna list
honestly.
some of those, right?
Yeah, we're gonna look at a few in just a minute. We gave them names and faces, mnemonics, and we'll have some fun with this today.
So this is like the second page of the stage one slants sequence for stage one. And you'll notice that our spelling rules don't really come in until the end of stage one when the students have a really solid foundation of those single consonants and the digraphs and the vowels. So our first rule here is that F, L, S, and Z rule. I know, that's a pretty common one. A lot of people know that one is the floss rule. So just kind of showing, here's some of Silver Moon's little mnemonics here. So let's take a look at some of these.
Yeah, we'll take a look at what some of these rules are. Just make note that along the way in these scopes and sequences, we are sequentially and systematically teaching all 7 types of syllables. If students can identify what kind of syllable they are looking at or spelling, it's going to help them produce the correct vowel sound. It'll help them spell correctly, and it will help them read more accurately. So our first pattern is always a closed syllable pattern. That's your basic short vowel sound. It can be a CVC or it can be a VC. So it's any one vowel closed in at the end by a consonant that will produce its short sound.
And
oh, go ahead, Carla.
no, I was just going to say that actually 50% of syllables in text are closed syllables. So it's very important students know these, right?
That's a crazy high amount.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And then you taught me that isn't it open and closed syllables account for 75% of our
Yes.
syllables in English words.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then, most of the students I come in contact with before I work with them, they didn't even know we had different types of syllables in our language. There's just oftentimes this information isn't out there as much as it should be. So the light bulb goes on when you start teaching some of these patterns, and it can be looked at very formulaically. I mean, you can use the images that you saw on the previous slide with the cute vowel and the consonant closing the door on the vowel, so the vowel can just kind of softly say its short sound. So if you want to play with that imagery, you can. If your student more connects with formulas, like they're a math kid, they love if you do this and you do this, then you get this. And a lot of my students are like this. They like to know, give me the formula. Well, here's your formula. If you got one vowel by itself, not next to another vowel, you add in a consonant right after the vowel, or a couple of consonants even, you're producing your closed syllable pattern. So that gives you your short vowel sound. So here is your formula.
I like to say that that vowel is super important, and that consonant is like its bodyguard. And when that bodyguard is closing in that vowel, it feels safe and happy, and it sings its sound. So there's all sorts of different ways you can come up with to make it fun.
Oh yeah, if you're in this field long enough, your letters start to have personalities, right?
Yes.
The spelling rules, especially, all of mine have names and faces. But okay, so how does this work? Well, interestingly enough, when I'm actually trained, I'm certified in SLANT system. I love SLANT. It is just the most amazing Orton Gillingham tool. Love it, love it, love it. So if you got questions about SLANT, they're not paying me to say this. You can contact me and ask me lots of questions. It's a wonderful program. I learned about SLANT and trained in SLANT and certified in SLANT after I published and authored Silver Moon spelling rules. So I didn't even know about SLANT when I wrote my program, which is crazy to me, because when you look at their scope and sequence, SLANT scope and sequence, and you look at the Silver Moon progression of skills, you can very easily plug and play. So you take the spelling rule concepts that are being taught in Silver Moon, you take your stage 1 scope and sequence, and you plug in the rules where they land within that scope and sequence. And it's really a pretty close fit. So this is a lot of fun to do. Here's our first rule. Sam loves fried zucchini. All right, good old Sam. He loves fried zucchini, and of course his name is a mnemonic. It helps you remember that the doubling letters at the end of one syllable words are FLS and Z, or SLF and Z. No matter what order you say them in, it's all the same letters. Sam is a spelling rule card. So all of the Silver Moon characters are presented on cards within our program. And when the kids learn about this spelling concept, we introduce the character, we bring in the mnemonics, we tell a story, you can kind of create a story around this, and we look for the hidden picture clues. So if you look closely, you should see some letters on that zucchini. Okay. You should also see a clue in the steam. You should see one vowel, one E, fluiding up in the steam. And that helps to remind kids that we don't use this rule in big multi-syllable words. Okay, we're going to use this with one syllable words. Now, a lot of teachers and kids, you know, it's good to be challenged, right? I challenge my students all the time. Find me a word that doesn't follow the rule, and we're going to dig in and figure out why, because there is usually always a reason why a word doesn't follow a given spelling rule. Because remember the 4% number? Yeah, most of our words are predictable based by spelling rule. So you think about the word gas, bus, yes. All right. Gas is an abbreviation. It's short for gasoline. Doesn't follow the rule. That's why it's part of a bigger word. Bus is part of a bigger word also. It actually comes from omnibus, which are the big double-decker European buses. Yes, now yes is one I have not found a reason for. So if any of you can find the reason for yes, I would love that. I heard a joke once, a teacher said, oh, it's short for yes, sirree, Bob.
Oh yeah, I've heard that too.
I don't know if that's legitimate, but I like that. And then your smaller words like your as, is, has, was, I want you to listen to the sound the S is making. As, is, has. All right, so that sound is why it doesn't follow the Sam loves fried zucchini rule. This rule is also commonly known as floss. But what kid likes to talk about dental floss, right? So we gave this rule a zucchini and a zebra instead. Okay, moving on.
So once we teach a new spelling pattern, we go immediately have the student go right into practicing using those sounds, those graphemes in what we call sound spelling paper. So this is really important for that whole orthographic mapping piece. It aids in getting these words, those letter strings embedded into their brains. So if I were to dictate the word, what's my word? Fluff. All right. You're going to be my student, Kelly. You ready? So the word is fluff. Okay. You're going to tell me all the sounds you hear in fluff, and you're going to move your chips.
Okay. Fluff.
Good. Now I'm going to have you write and say the sounds as you do it. So you can air write to show us. Do it again now, writing and saying the sounds.
Okay.
Good job.
Nanny is 2 F's, doesn't it?
Yep. And we also are giving you guys this paper. You can use chips, you can use, game pieces, whatever. You can even just have the student like highlight or draw a dot or in that circle. And then once we teach, then we move into drills. So another thing that you can use is, if you have index cards or whatever, and write those sounds on an index card. But I want to emphasize this. So we're going to be switching the cards here for the students to be spelling words or reading words that follow that particular sound pattern, that particular spelling rule that we just taught. I want you to be very cognizant of what shows up, because if we teach it, then a particular generalization, for example, to make the k sound, It has to be followed by an E, I, or Y if we use a K, because if we use a C, it's going to change itself. So make sure whatever shows up here is what you teach. So for example, if we were teaching that double F, L, S, and Z at the end of a one syllable word after a short vowel, we're not going to have a single L, S, or Z, or F at the end. So, so here you go. So then the student will just read, and these will be nonsense words, and just read. Right? And they all follow that pattern. Notice here, the K is in front of the I. So you either, if you're unsure, you will set your cards up ahead of time, or be really on it with your students. If something shows up, you're going to switch it real fast. So for example, like a V would never come at the end, you know. So here is then, you know, the power of decodable text comes into play here, where now we're going to give our students, we've taught them that spelling pattern, have practiced it in writing, worked on some reading nonsense words in isolation. Now we're going to read in context and apply those patterns into this. So here's our story called Buzz Off Miss Hill, where you will notice there's a lot of opportunity for the student to see those double L's, F's, S's, and Z's at the end of words. And there are some other spelling rules that have been taught. So for example, right, the C and the K generalization will also show up here. And so that is that. And then finally, we can apply those spelling generalizations in everything that you've previously been taught into sentence dictations. So we're going to start with small phrases, and then we move up to short sentences to longer sentences. So you can scaffold this for your students that may not be ready for really long sentences. This is also a very difficult task for students because they have to remember all the words that you said in their head. They also have to remember you know, all the rules that you just taught them and those sound symbol correspondences. So this is difficult. So if you're just starting out, I would start with short sentences or even phrases. So Kelly, let's do this one together. You're going to be my student. So here we go. Your sentence is, Jeff fell in the lush grass. Repeat that sentence.
Jeff fell in the lush grass.
Okay, now you're going to repeat it and you're going to move your marker. So having some sort of a manipulative for every word you say, you're going to move your markers. So again, the sentence is, Jeff fell in the lush grass. Now move your markers as you say the sentence.
Okay, here we go. Jeff fell in the lush grass.
Good. Now you're going to write your sentence.
Okay. So I like to say my sounds while I write it. So Jeff, yep, fell, okay, in the lush, sh. And I might be finger spelling this as we go too. And yeah, grass, s. Yeah.
Now read your whole sentence.
Jeff fell in the lush grass.
All right. Now, as the teacher, you're going to be remaining silent. If your student is stuck, you want to point them back to those manipulatives and see if they can recall the sentence. There's something magical about those that a lot of the times they can go back to those manipulatives and remember that sentence. At the very last resort, then you would give them the sentence back. But again, this is a longer sentence. So again, if, you know, you could even just start with Jeff fell, right? As your first. Right. Actually, that's a sentence itself. It's a who and a what and a doing. But again, everything is going to follow the rules that we have explicitly taught. No surprises.
Yeah, and some kids will be able to apply those rules right away while they're composing, but you'll get to a certain point where they probably won't be able to compose and apply those rules all the time at the same time. So at the end of that sentence, just say, you know what, did you check for any spelling rules? And they'll go back and they'll, you know, look to see where they need to apply those rules. And hopefully that generalizes and becomes real automatic. So speaking of spelling rules, another one we have here is Miss Queen Quail. This is a character that was created out of the difficulties so many students have for remembering the sound for QU. You know, a QU says qu. They borrow letters sounds from the letters K and W. So there's actually a whole lesson plan attached to this rule within the Silver Moon system. You're teaching this as well within the SLANT system or whatever Orton-Gillingham-based system you're using, but it's very, very helpful to show students after they've listened to those sounds. What sounds do you hear when you say kwa? Or yeah, it's k, wa. Okay, if I were to spell that phonetically, what letters are those? Oh, it's K and a W. All right, so when you hear k within words, it's actually a QU. So essentially they're translating. They're taking that which is usually spelled phonetically, and they're translating that to this rule base. Oh, if I hear I need to spell with a QU. So try this. If you finger spell the word quick, how many fingers would you use? We do teach that because U is never, or Q is never without U, that we put that phonetic pattern on one finger. There isn't a single word in the language that has a Q without a U. So we'd have qu, eh. So 3 sounds, three fingers attached to those sounds within that word. Real quickly, let's show you a quick snippet here. I've got a 40-second snippet of an extension activity. This is something you can use with your students. I'll give you some background here. This is a student with ESL needs. He lives in a family at home who only speaks an African language. And so he's having some difficulty with some of these basic phonetic patterns in the English language. He's a really fun student to watch. He's already done the lesson on the queen quail. He's learned it, and now she's extending the lesson and getting him to write. Now, he doesn't want to write by himself, but see how she pulls him in. This is just awesome.
Quail's in the president's house, and that's as far as I can get to.
And what is she going to do there? Can you think of any other words that start with qua that she might do there?
Quit your job.
And she will quit
No, but that's
her
you.
job.
I want to know you in the phone.
Did I make a mistake?
Yes.
Can you fix it? What mistake did I make?
No, you.
Great.
Now I gotta check all of these.
Yes, you better.
This makes me chuckle every time. Okay, you can pause the video here, Carla. Just a really crafty way to get the student involved in writing. She started the writing. He eventually takes over the writing because she's making too many mistakes. Clever, very clever way to use QU and get a student writing who's a resistant writer. Okay, we'll preview another spelling rule here. If you remember the SLANT scope and sequence and the Silver Moon scope and sequence, both programs are teaching the same concept, so we're kind of marrying the two. SIG-ELK helps us learn that we use CK after a short vowel at the end of a word. Otherwise, we're going to use K. And this poor guy, this was funny. This was released right after COVID happened, so it was very appropriate during the time. But some nuances to this, when you get to multi-syllable words, if you have the sound ick, like ick, gross, it's not going to be spelled with a CK, I-C-K, although the I is short. That's a different pattern. You can trace it back etymologically to different origins, and that will be spelled with an IC. Otherwise, though, if you hear a k at the end and you've got your short vowel sound right before that sound, you're going to use a CK. And of course, also you're introducing the whole digraph concept here. The 2 letters, 1 sound. Okay, so that is our SIG-ELK. Our team at Silver Moon works really hard to create activity pages to support teaching and support learning. Here's an example of a couple of our pages. A lot of really hands-on, simultaneously multisensory stuff going on where the students are hearing the sound, feeling the sound, segmenting with fingers or tokens, on a desk, and applying a rule base. So these can be found at the end of our blogs right now. We're releasing actually digital platform, and they'll all be housed on the digital platform within the next few months.
Yeah, and I like how, for this particular activity, the student really has to think here because, oh, look what comes right in front. There's a consonant, so they would know. They really have to think about what rule to apply. Is that going to be a CK? No, because it has to come after a short vowel. So yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, they're building understanding, and that's the whole point of nonsense words, right? They can't spell by memorizing if you use a nonsense word. So see if they can apply a learned rule base to something that's nonsensical, because if they can, they've understood what you've taught.
Mm-hmm. Here's a demonstration of that CK rule with the sound spelling paper. So Peyton has learned a new rule today for a new grapheme for CK. When we hear the k sound at the end of a
one syllable word
after a
short vowel.
What do we use?
CK at the end of the word.
Yep, we spell k with CK. So now we're going to spell some words with the k sound. All right, so your first word is block. All right, show us how you use your sound spelling paper.
Block.
Good, now write it.
Block.
Good job. Your next word is shack. Okay. So you kind of get the idea of that. Also notice it makes one sound. So it goes in one box. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. So that is the rule with that. So they're hearing that one phoneme per box. Okay, so and then again, we teach that rule. We present the student with ample opportunity to practice. So if you can get your hands on some good decodable text that matches your scope and sequence, that would be ideal. Here we have some sentences with the CK rule. So you could have the student go through, highlight, circle throughout, really take note, talk about what is going on in this word. Okay, I see that CK at the end. All right, let's analyze this a little bit. What's happening right before it? I see one vowel. How many syllables is the word? And see, and have them really go through and check and kind of validate that rule that you had just taught them. And then we also have text over here that will reinforce the K at the end of the diagram, of the blend, like in the word milk. And then there's lots of opportunity to practice reading those words.
Okay, so now we're taking a dip into a little more advanced concept, silent E, and this would come a little further along in your scope and sequence probably, but silent E can have more than one job. I always think of silent E as a worker, and there are 7 different reasons for silent E, and how I define silent E. I think you guys have 7 different reasons for silent E also, but Huge Hedgehog is going to teach us that words ending with J are spelled using DGE after short vowels. Otherwise, you're going to use GE. Why is this? Why aren't we just using a J? Well, English language words can't end with J. I tell that to kids and they're always like, what? Our words aren't allowed to end with J? And they get real animated. Yeah, there are other letters too that can't end, our words in the English language. And they get real excited about learning this. It almost feels like trivia, but it helps them to understand the rhyme and the reason to why we spell the way we do. So if you look at the word huge, how many jobs does silent E have in the word huge?
I see 2.
Okay, Carla, what do you see?
Sorry, no, I'm sorry. No, I don't. I see 1.
Well, maybe you do see 2.
Oh no, I do see 2.
Yeah. So what's the first rule?
So
What's
it's the E is making the U long.
Yep.
And the G, it's making the G soft.
Exactly. So silent E has 2 jobs in the word huge. How about the word hedge? How many jobs does E have in hedge?
Just 1.
Yes. What would the rule be? Or the reason be?
Well, because It is a short vowel, one syllable word, and it ends with a J. So it cannot be spelled with a J. And if it was only the G, then it would be heej.
Huge, you got it. You can't jump over 2 letters. It's not a long jumper. Yeah, so you give all sorts of animated, characteristics to these letters as you teach this stuff long enough. Right. So there's our huge hedgehog. I mean, the little added bonus here is the G, and we won't get into that now, but of course, also all of these pictures are loaded up with hidden clues. So you're looking for the letters in blue within the image.
Yeah, like the lodge over here.
Yep, the lodge, and there's maybe some other stuff in there too. You'd have to look.
So we've got some other reasons. It makes also the C soft, like in mice and stage. No words end in V. So if we have words like have, give, and live, they actually are phonetically regular. They can be sounded out. And I like to use the little saying like never, ever, ever does a word end in V. If there is a V, we add on an E. And that helps the students to remember, like in the word have, H-A-V-E, it's phonetically regular. It can make the S say Z, like in cheese and nose, prevents words from being plural. So if we took the E off of the word please, it would be like more than one plea. Or if we take the E off of goose, it would be like a lot of goo, right? Every syllable needs a written vowel. So even though in our consonant LE syllable, we don't pronounce that E at the end, you do hear a little bit of a schwa when you say that syllable, like bum, bull, you hear a little in there, but it is the E's on the end to kind of make sure that we know that that is a syllable. And then it also makes a TH voiced. So if we took off the E off of bathe, it would be bath. Cloth to clothe. There's a whole bunch of other words. And then how we use the sound spelling paper for this, after the student says all the sounds, we write B, R, I, J, and it's a short vowel. So we put that E in there because it doesn't make a sound. So it goes in the box with the preceding consonant, and then we can cross that out just to show that it doesn't make a sound. All right, so real quickly, we'll go through this. Spelling tests are sometimes mandatory. Sometimes parents want spelling lists. They kind of expect that. So what do we do about spelling tests? Since we are really teaching our students that we're not memorizing words, we're learning the reasons why we spell and how to spell. So here's an alternative to that. We teach a specific rule, a specific generalization, and we practice that specific rule throughout the week. You can use the sound spelling paper. You can use any of Kelly's, resources there. We can do the Martian words, those that pounding and sounding with the, switching the letters, and then reading and spelling in context, going through and having students really find those words. And then at the end of the week, we just test them on a random list. So they are not working on memorizing anything. It kind of takes that load off of them. So Kelly, your daughters, in the beginning, when you said they had such a hard time with spelling tests, this would really be helpful, especially for those struggling readers, those students with dyslexia. Here, if you want to take a screenshot of this, this is just a little example of what you could do Monday through Friday instead of giving a, predetermined list. So go ahead and take a screenshot of that. And then here are some games that were within that suggested, it was just a suggested thing, activities that you could do. Here's just a word game, really looking at analyzing those words, having the student really talk about what is going on in that word patch and why does it have a TCH at the end instead of a CH, because it's, again, it follows that rule, one syllable word after a short vowel. So go, if you want to take a screenshot of that as well. That's a game that can be played, have the students play. And then they can also do, this is really easy. We're including this in your resources as well. Just a little easy race to 100 game. I think anytime students are thinking they're playing a game and they're actually learning, it's a bonus, right? So, just you dictate words to the student, they roll their dice, and you can do this as a full class. And then they can be doing their dictation on that sound spelling paper too, writing those words out. And then Kelly's got a rule match game or sorting activity here.
We got a couple different options here. So I always say, keep in mind application versus ID. Are you having kids apply rules, spelling concepts, or are you having them ID rules or spelling concepts? And you should be doing both. So in the rule match game, it's an Uno style game. Every card has a word or a rule image on it, and kids are reading those cards. So they're reading, but they're also identifying what spelling patterns or generalizations are within those words. And those rules, the picture cards, are their wild cards. So this is a lot of fun. The rule sorting activity, we don't have time to watch this today, but you can look this up on YouTube. Essentially, you're taking your rule cards or your character cards that the kids haven't taught already. You're pre-making a stack of words that follow those patterns, and you're having kids do a rule sort as opposed to a word sort. So they're sorting words by spelling rule.
So it really like solidifies that into their brains, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. They get all excited about being able to see these patterns. Yeah.
All right, so kind of closing it up here. Explicit spelling instruction is really critical. I mean, it is just as important as the reading itself. So when we think about our poor spellers that are, I'll just read this. Explicit spelling instruction is critical for reading development. Poor spellers so much time and effort trying to decode words that they cannot devote attention to comprehending text. All right, good spellers, on the other hand, are able to decode words effortlessly and focus their attention on comprehension. And there's Anita Archer again. But that's the truth, right? We really want to want our students to just become really automatic in everything they do, in the spelling, in the reading, and it all is interconnected. We need to be really, not saying, hey, we've got spell check on the on the computer and kids do everything on the computer anyways. We can't do that. That is, I think there's a lot happening now with technology is really kind of taking over, and our developing brains are losing those critical connections that need to be made for literacy and many other things too. I could kind of go on about that, but we did include, again, like we're going to give you a whole bunch of resources, a big packet that we're going to email you for some of these things that we referenced as well. There are Silvermoon and Slant has a whole bunch of material. So the decodable text that we referenced within this, these are our 7 stages. There's over 2,000 pages of decodable words and sentences and stories within that. So if you're looking, and the scope and sequence comes with all of that. So if you're looking for a scope and sequence that you don't have, you do have the methodologies and you know how to present an Orton Gillingham based lesson. It can be used with, anybody can use those. And then Kelly, you want to your Silvermoon here?
Same thing with Silvermoon. It's supplemental. So you can either use it cover to cover. You always tell teachers and parents, if you can teach a child to spell, you're going to teach them to read, as long as you're teaching them systematically and explicitly those phonetic patterns. So you're looking for just a phonics program. I mean, that is what Silvermoon is. It does not cover reading comprehension. It's not it is used as universal spelling program actually in quite a few schools, but it's not comprehensive. It is supplemental. So you can plug and play or use it as is. All 3 books cover all 7 types of syllables.
But it all supports comprehension. So remember that.
True. That is true. Very true. Thank you for that, Carla.
Yeah. If you are looking for future training opportunities through Slant, we offer a very comprehensive Orton Gillingham based training program. We actually have an introductory course starting next week. And we do a full year practicum with supported coaching for teachers and then certification. So it is, we go over spelling and morphology and comprehension, written expression, and on top of decoding. And then Kelly, what else? You do some stuff too.
We do some stuff too. Yeah, I highly recommend the Slant training. we also offer some training, workshops and PD on dyslexia in the science of reading. I have a 3-part workshop that we can offer school districts. It's actually offered through the continuing ed department over at University of Wisconsin Oshkosh. We do PD on executive functioning skills and training, and PD on systematic and explicit spelling instruction using Silver Moon, of course. So those are some options there.
So kind of bringing it back to what we said at the beginning, the affirm, remind, and expand. We hope that we did all of this for you. Hopefully we did affirm what you do and that what you're doing is right, and keep doing it, and remind you that, you know, there are resources out there, and, you know, I think that this is really, really big and coming really to become a lot more well known right now, of the science behind how our brains learn how to read and all the research supporting that. But I also hope that we did expand and give you some ideas and things that you can use in the classroom, really simple things that you do not need fancy anything for, but you can put into use. But thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here on this summer day of where you could be sitting at the pool, but instead here you are learning and expanding your knowledge for your students. So, and thank you for everything you do as teachers. We will open up now if anybody has any questions. We'll stay on here for a question and answer session. Does anybody have any questions? No questions.
Maybe Beth answered all the questions.